Hello, I am Joshua P. Warren, and this is Joshua P. Warren Daily. And listen to this. I visited the grave of Star Trek's Captain Kirk. Now, you may be thinking, whoa, what do you mean, Josh? William Shatner isn't dead. Oh, just listen. I will explain. It's quite interesting. I am fascinated with places that have extremely dynamic geology. Of course, I am from North Carolina, and in western North Carolina, you have mountains there. You have the highest peak east of the Mississippi. Then in the middle of the state, you have the flatlands we call the Piedmont, and then you have the coast. When I was in Puerto Rico, miles off the shore there, you have the Puerto Rico Trench, which is the deepest point in the Atlantic Ocean, about 30,000 feet deep. And yet on the island of Puerto Rico, you have the highest point, which is over 4,000 feet tall, Cerro de Punta. And, it's not a big island. Puerto Rico's 100 miles wide by 30 miles top to bottom. So look at how extreme the geology is there. Once again, now here I am in Nevada. And Nevada, it's so strange because here in the Las Vegas Valley, people think of Las Vegas and what do they think of? Big, hot, flat desert, right? And that is so accurate in many ways. The Las Vegas Valley is at 2,000 feet, which is still a lot higher than some places in this country. And yet, I am in the Las Vegas Valley right now at 2,000 feet. I'm looking out my window, and I can see a snow-covered mountain. It's over 12,000 feet, or about 12,000 feet tall. It's Mount Charleston. Isn't that crazy? It's going to be 107 degrees here in a couple days, they say. There's still going to be snow on that mountain when I look out my window. Last year, there was snow on Mount Charleston until the middle of July. I remember seeing that. So here I am, where it's 2,000 feet in Las Vegas. I look out at this mountain that's 12,000 feet. The highest mountain in Nevada is called Boundary Peak. It's over 13,000 feet tall. Do you know what Las Vegas means? Las Vegas means the meadows in Spanish, because hundreds of years ago, the climate was different. There was enough water here coming from springs. Instead of a big desert in this valley, you would have seen a big green meadow. Isn't that weird? Do you know what Nevada means? Take a guess. What do you think Nevada? What do you think of when you think of Nevada? Well, again, you probably just think of big deserts and rocky ranges. Nevada actually means snow-covered or snowy mountains, because that's what people would think of in the distance. They'd see these snowy mountains. So I'm talking again about very dynamic geology, and I'm really attracted to these places because I find a lot of paranormal activity at places that have diverse dynamic geology. And of course, I have talked a lot about the fact that I was the first researcher to find a correlation between places on Earth where we have gravity anomalies and paranormal hotspots. A paranormal hotspot is simply a place on Earth that is famous for having paranormal or extraordinary, strange, mysterious activity. And so I sat down and plotted with my team all of the different places around planet Earth that seem to be sort of famous for having some kind of, paranormal or spiritual phenomenon. I divided it into ghosts and spirits, UFOs and aliens, cryptids and monsters, and then finally sacred sites. So for example, ghost would be places like maybe Transylvania or the Tower of London or the Winchester Mansion, and then of course aliens and UFOs might be like Roswell, Area 51, perhaps even Tunguska, whatever. And then cryptids would be like Bluff Creek, California, and then Mothman there at Point Pleasant, West Virginia, Loch Ness. And then sacred sites could be like, of course, in Bethlehem or the Great Pyramids or Machu Picchu or Chichen Itza. I mean, places like that. And when you plot all those things, and then you look at NASA gravity maps that overlay gravity anomalies onto the Earth, you find an amazing correlation between places on Earth that tend to have weaker gravity and paranormal hotspots. And of course, my friend Corby Waste took me on a VIP tour behind the scenes in Pasadena, near Pasadena, there at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where I got to talk to scientists and people who were in charge of what they call the Grace FO project and understand more about how that works, which is the project they use to map Earth's gravitational anomalies. And I keep finding that even though the Earth's gravitational field is sort of fluid, that most of the places that tend to have lower gravity, like weaker gravity, are paranormal hotspots. And of course, as I've made a little like video report about this, which is less than 2 minutes long. I sent it out to everybody on my e-newsletter list recently. If you didn't see it, I'm going to post it as soon as I'm done with this podcast. I'm going to post it on my Twitter at Joshua P. Warren, at Joshua P. Warren, so you can watch it and you'll see me overlay these things and you'll see what I'm talking about. And this is leading me to all kinds of new areas of research. For example, I'm doing experiments where I am putting instrumentation that would ordinarily be used in paranormal investigation in a state of free fall so that it's sort of weightless, to see if being weightless makes a difference in terms of how the equipment detects what's on the other side. Because gravity holds things together, right? It binds things together. So you think weaker gravity means looser connections, the veil thins, windows and doorways and portals may open, right? You understand why there might be a connection there theoretically. And then, of course, as you know, I'm also trying to back engineer some of the time travel stuff. These are things that I've talked about, so you understand why I am interested in the connection between gravity and paranormal stuff and these dynamic places on planet Earth. Now, getting back to Nevada and the dynamic range we have here, do you know that there is this area? I've talked about it before. I'll remind you. I'm sure you've heard of the Bermuda Triangle, but have you ever heard of the Nevada Triangle? It goes from Reno to Las Vegas to Fresno, California. So just imagine, I don't know, if you don't know the area too well, that's fine. But it's like it starts in southern Nevada, goes up to northern Nevada, and then out west over to Fresno, California. In that area, okay, way more stuff has disappeared than in the Bermuda Triangle. Over 2,000 planes have vanished over the last 60 years. That's about 3 per month. Far more than in the Bermuda Triangle. And what's especially weird is most of this land is just barren. It doesn't have any vegetation. It's not like we're in a thick wilderness or a deep ocean. When something crashes, I mean, you should be able to easily see it. Not to mention we have all this military stuff around here, sweeping and scanning everything. It should be really easy to find these wrecks of these planes, but we very seldom do. You know, even Steve Fawcett disappeared for a long time. Nobody knows what happened to him, the great aviator. 2,000 planes over the last 60 years. And now this is even more freaky. If you go to the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department website, you can do this right now, and you do a search for missing persons, there's a page that comes up. I'm going to post a still of this page. And it says, quote, "Here in Las Vegas, an average of 5 to 7 adult persons are reported missing each day, and more than 200 a month," end quote. That's here just in Las Vegas. 5 to 7 adult persons every day, and more than 200 a month. LVMPD.com is the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department website. I'll post this for you. So I'm not just making up some bullshit. Like, there's some very weird stuff happening here. And also, it's like last night, the wind was howling outside of our condo. It got to that high pitch. It was hints of that banshee scream. I mean, it kind of gives you goosebumps sometimes when you hear that and you're not expecting it, when that wind really starts screaming and screeching through there like that. And so at one point, I got up and I walked over near one of the windows in the kitchen and I go, "Hey, Lauren, smell this." And she came over and ozone. Oh, very, very strong aroma of ozone. Now, a lot of people think of ozone as being that smell that you get during a thunderstorm, and that's true. You do smell it, but I smell it even more distinctly because when I run like Tesla coils and electrostatic generators, it creates a very concentrated ozone right next to the machine. And this is just a matter of electricity manipulating the oxygen molecules or the oxygen atoms. And so basically, instead of like being regular oxygen, that's O3. So I'm not going to get into the chemistry of this, but what is happening there is you're getting a charge built up in the air. And part of that comes from the wind, the just powerful wind that whips through. But then also here in some of these western states of the United States that have these really high mountains, you get what's called a stratospheric intrusion. Stratospheric intrusion. And what that means is the stratosphere has this layer of ozone. You've heard of the ozone layer. And up there, it's great because it protects us from a lot of the harmful cosmic radiation that's coming in and radiation from the sun and all this stuff. It shields us. It helps to shield us. But sometimes when you have these areas where you get these weird, weird atmospheric currents and these big high mountains, the mountains kind of like help channel the stratosphere closer down to the surface of the earth, and it brings a lot of the ozone down with it. So like I say, I'm in a position where I look out the window and I see a mountain here that is 10,000 feet higher than I am, and I'm in a valley. Well, guess what? If you have one of these stratospheric intrusions, then the stratosphere currents dip down and it brings some of that ozone down and you can smell it. And they say that that is not really good. Like, you shouldn't be breathing in too much of that stuff. But this is just another example of how much energy and flow there is here. How it gets so hot and then it gets so cold and then it gets so still and then so windy. And then you have, ozone and then it's clear. And I mean, like all this kind of stuff. And gravitationally, if you look at the overlay I do with the gravity map and the paranormal hotspots that are plotted, you see this whole area around Nevada and the Sierra Nevadas, that whole area, big hotspot with weak gravity, despite the fact you have these big mountains between here and around here in California, still weak gravity. And the gravitational anomalies are the product of at least a couple of things. One being the way that water is behaving on the surface of the earth and how it's sort of sloshing around and being distributed, which is, of course, is affected by a lot of forces, including the moon. But also what's happening inside the earth with this supposedly like molten lava that's spinning around like a dynamo. So all these little variables create these anomalies. And so I've been wanting to go for a while to one of the more extreme places around here just for a daytime getaway. It's called the Valley of Fire. You ever heard of that? The Valley of Fire. And so here in the Las Vegas Valley, it's desert. You've got your strip, you have all the buildings. If you look out, the mountains around you pretty much seem like they're tan or beige or whatever. But now, if you drive about 1 hour north of here, then you will get to a state park called the Valley of Fire. It's 46,000 acres, and it's called the Valley of Fire because as you drive through these winding roads, all of a sudden you go around a bend and wow, it looks like the mountains are bursting with flame because they are bright red. And you know how Sedona, Arizona is famous for these bright red cliffs and peaks? It's like a miniature Sedona. I mean, they say that at some point, millions of years ago, geologically, some forces like shoved all these rocks up and then they eroded. And they're not only bright red, but they're in some really, really weirdo shapes. You've seen these types of pictures. If you haven't ever seen them in person, you know what I'm talking about. For example, there's one called Elephant Rock, and it just looks like a big elephant with a long trunk sticking down to the ground because the space between the body and the trunk is eroded out. You've got, everywhere you look, like things are, sometimes they look like a giant mound of bricks or honeycombs or just, crazy looking stuff. Crazy enough that the Valley of Fire has been used in a lot of movies. Okay, and I'll get to that in a minute. But when you go into the Valley of Fire, and there's like a 10-mile scenic drive you can take, and there are little trails and stuff you can walk on. When you go, you pay $10. Again, it's a state park. You pay $10 when you go in there. You can take a picnic, whatever you want. They have a visitor center. But I just went there a few days ago, and the visitor center is still closed because of this pandemic stuff. But at least the park is open. And there is a decent amount of wildlife in there. They have, foxes and coyotes and ground squirrels. And, listen to this. Oh, by the way, at one point, Lauren and I were driving along, and we looked up and we saw some mountain goats on a cliff. And I took some pictures of the mountain goats. So I'll post a picture of the mountain goats for you. But at one point, as we were driving around, we would get out and we'd look at an overlook, and they had this sign about these wild desert tortoises. And it said that, and there are also ground squirrels. At one point, we were driving down a road and we saw a ground squirrel shoot across. We never saw one of these wild desert tortoises, but they say, and this is really weird, that these tortoises, they store up fat and water in the spring, and they store 1 year's worth of water in their canteen-like bladders. Now think about that. A turtle, and I'm not sure how big these things are because I didn't see one, but they're out there. These turtles store up 1 year of water in their canteen-like bladders, and then they just absorb it when they need over the year. And I was thinking to myself, as we were driving along, we passed sort of a little memorial for a guy who was like a Civil War hero who had been traveling through this area in, I think, 1915. And they said that, he was doomed because he was looking for water, and there wasn't any water to be found. And so finally he crawled under his wagon basically and died, and somebody found him there. He was probably practically mummified. And so there's a little memorial there, and I was thinking, man, that guy, with barring rain, there's no way that he could have lived under these circumstances unless he had found one of those damn turtles and sucked its bladder out. Now look, I know that's gross, but I was talking about Kon-Tiki a while back, and I was thinking, how did these guys make it for months across the Pacific Ocean in the middle of salt water on a little raft? How'd they replenish their fresh water? They said sometimes they'd catch fish and they'd cut them open, and some fish have a bladder with fresh water, basically, or fresh liquid. It's not salty. You can drink it. So that's a little tip. If you're ever lost in the desert and you see a tortoise, look, I'm not advocating anything harmful. I'm just letting you know this could be a tip. You pick the tortoise up and you suck on him. I don't want to get into too much detail where you suck. Now, I must tell you in full disclosure here. They say that you shouldn't do that because that's his water. That's the tortoise's water. So you pick him up and you suck his water out, he's gonna die. But if you're ever in a survival situation and you got to suck a tortoise, just remember that you better tiptoe or do something quiet as hell to get him, because they say that when these tortoises become alarmed, they just empty their bladder a lot of times and then they die anyway, which is why they caution you. They say when you're just a dickhead tourist here and you see some tortoise, don't go up to him and mess with him because he might void his water bladder and now he's going to die. You're going to kill the tortoise by coming up and frightening him. So you better tiptoe like you know. If you're in, if this is I'm saying if you're in a survival situation and you have to suck a tortoise, apparently that is an option. Now, I've never seen that done. So I do watch a lot of these survival shows and stuff. So I would like to see one of these survival guys go suck a tortoise. That's just one of the little things that you've learned from listening to this podcast. Also, there was a sign at another overlook about cryptobiotic soil. And what this is telling us is as you travel through this park and you see all these giant, shining, red, amazing things, and you should look up pictures of this, the Valley of Fire in Nevada. And just if you're going to come here and visit for something, maybe you're going to come to my upcoming conference or whatever, and you want to get out and see some nature, this is something you might want to put on your trip if you can spend some extra time. The Valley of Fire. There is a sign about cryptobiotic stuff, meaning that sometimes when you see these big bright red rocks, they have what looks like charcoal or something kind of black smeared over certain parts of them. And you might not even notice it too much at first because it almost seems a little bit like a shadow or something. But it turns out this is a very special thing, these black sections of some of these bright red, fiery, flaming rocks. And I swear, when you're looking at a distance at some of these rocks and the sun is hitting at the right angle, it really does look like there's a fire in the distance. It's kind of crazy. Cryptobiotic soil is what creates some of these black patches. And they said on this sign that this is actually a very, very thin layer of living stuff on some of these rocks. It's a combination of algae, lichen, fungi, and bacteria. And they say that this is so valuable and rare and special that if you get out there and you step on this stuff, or you drag your backpack, your walking stick, well, if you disturb this, they say it will take up to 250 years for that to come back. So you piece of shit, if you mess up this black film on these rocks, that's 250 fucking years. You hear me? Before that black shit comes back. Now there's a lot of it, by the way, all over the place. But somebody really cares a hell of a lot about it. What was it Dr. Seuss said? A person's a person, no matter how small. 250 years. But anyway, going there is special if you're a geek, especially if you're into pop culture and stuff like that, because it's been a perfect place to film a lot of great movies. And for example, the movie Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Everybody remembers that movie, right? Sharon Stone was in the movie. That was her big breakthrough role. And they said that basically uh, all the outdoor scenes on Mars were filmed there at the Valley of Fire. And by the way, after going there, I watched the movie Total Recall again, and yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, it's okay. I don't think it's that great. I know when it came out, it was really cutting edge, but I don't know. I kind of had a lukewarm reception. It kind of got long and boring and formulaic to me. I think that I'll just toss this out there. I think the movie would have been had a better ending if at the end, after all that shit happens, he just they take him out of the chamber and it's like, oh, how'd you like that adventure? And then he goes home to his wife and goes, hey, I picked up some cantaloupes on the way home. And she goes, well, what did you do today? And he's like, oh, nothing much. I think that would have been a better ending. But anyway, they manipulated it a lot, but all the outdoor scenes from Total Recall were shot there. But here is why this is sacred ground for a lot of people. That is because in 1994, a movie came out called Star Trek Generations. I believe it was the seventh Star Trek movie. And this movie already had a lot of Trekkies orgasming because they were bringing some of the old school Star Trek people and the next generation people together for a movie. But then the real kicker, the real clinch, the real unexpected, amazing shocker was at the end of this movie, or toward the end of this movie, and look, it's 1994. I'm gonna spoil it. Sorry. Captain Kirk, Captain James T. Kirk, gets killed. Well, he dies. Let's put it that way. He kind of gets killed and dies. I'll explain. And then he's buried there. There is this, when you drive through the Valley of Fire, you get to this one spot, I think they call it the White Domes area, and you get out of your car. We were the only people there, thanks to the pandemic. We got out of the car. The wind was blowing so hard, I'm telling you, it got dangerous at one point because we walked out onto some cliffs and the wind was blowing so hard that I was seriously afraid to take a picture with my cell phone, holding my cell phone with one hand. I felt if I held it with one hand, it was going to be gone. I was gripping my cell phone with two hands taking pictures. I mean, it was seriously dangerous. There's a story in North Carolina, in the area where I come from, about Blowing Rock, North Carolina, and I believe the story is like a guy fell off the rock, and then the wind blew him back onto the rock, so they call it Blowing Rock. I'm telling you, shit like that is possible. So, anyway, when you go there to this overlook, you can walk down this little trail, and there in front of you is what they call Silica Dome. Giant, I believe it's sandstone, structure there. You can imagine Silica Dome. It's white. And they filmed all throughout Star Trek Generations at this dome. And I'm from you can tell obviously the actors had to get their asses out there and hike to that thing. I mean, I guess they could have helicoptered them in, but hopefully not on a day as windy as the one when we were there. So in this movie, of course, you have William Shatner playing Captain Kirk. You have Patrick Stewart playing Picard. And then you have, as the villain, Malcolm McDowell, which, of course, Malcolm McDowell, very famous from Kubrick's movie A Clockwork Orange. He plays the villain Tolian Soren. Now, I have to tell you, I'm a big Star Wars guy, and everybody makes fun of this geek battle between Star Wars and Star Trek. I've watched a decent amount of Star Trek, but I've just never been a big Star Trek fan. Mobius, on the other hand, huge, huge Trekkie, like a huge Trekkie. So I was thinking the whole time I was there, like, man, I wish that I could, teleport Mobius here right now to be at this sacred spot because in the movie, what happens is Captain Kirk and Captain Picard and Malcolm McDowell's character, Tully and Soren, they're having a big fight. They drag this out all throughout the movie, basically, but they end up having a big fight on this dome. And then eventually, Captain Kirk, he does something heroic and self-sacrificing, and he ends up sort of falling off the dome with a bunch of like wreckage and rubbish and bullshit. And then Captain Picard comes down there and kind of like holds his hand or whatever until Kirk dies. And I can't remember what Captain Kirk's last words were. I think it was something like, "Oh, it was fun. That was a fun time," or something like that. So anyway, Kirk dies because I went back and I watched this movie also after going there. And then Picard is the only person there who is able to bury Kirk. So we can imagine he has dragged Kirk up and just like covered his ass with a bunch of rocks. And then there's this sweeping helicopter shot of Picard just standing there looking down at the grave of Captain Kirk. And so this is sacred ground for Trekkies. People pilgrimage to this spot to see this from all over the world. The tomb of the fictional character Captain James Tiberius Kirk. So I took a picture of myself. I actually had Lauren photograph me. I'll post it for you. I'll post a picture of me standing in front of the final resting place of Captain Kirk in the Valley of Fire at Silica Dome. I'll post a picture, like a still from the movie, of that spot with Captain Picard looking down on Kirk's grave. And then I'll post a picture of the mountain goats for you. But what an interesting day trip. It took us an hour to get there. We had a great time. And then we turned around and left. And on the way out, I called Texas Roadhouse, and we were able to go there on the way home and go inside and have a nice steak and chicken and salads and all that, baked potato. So look, things are going quite well in my neck of the woods. I'm very happy with how my wishing machine has been performing here. And so that is how I was able to visit the fictional grave of the fictional character Captain Kirk. And I have appeared a number of times on a TV show called Weird or What that's made by a company in Canada. And what's interesting about Weird or What is that it's one of those shows that just like addresses a series of mysteries. And if you watch it in Canada, the Canadian version, it actually has William Shatner as the host of the show. He comes out and introduces segments and stuff. But apparently they wouldn't pay him enough to allow himself to be used in the American version of the show. So if you watch Weird or What in the USA, there's no Captain Kirk, there's no William Shatner. They just cut the stories together without a host. But you watch it in Canada, you have him. And so on one of these, I had heard through the grapevine that William Shatner said my name on TV in Canada. And I said, well, holy shit. So I got the Canadian version, and sure as there it is. William Shatner, I actually have Captain Kirk saying my name on television. And I thought, wow, if they could see me now, I fucking made it. I made it. Captain Kirk said my name on TV. I've told you that before. All right. When it comes to filming, I just filmed a little video that I'm going to be releasing in the next couple of days. I think you know what this is about. And by the way, before I tell you, when I film little videos and I release them to you, like stuff I just do on my own, I'm handling all the cords and the microphone and the lighting, all that. And this is a weird theory that has just been stuck in my mind for a while. And I'm half joking and half serious when I say that. But have you ever noticed how that when you take something that's like a string or a cord or a line, that there just seems to be some kind of a mysterious force in the universe that just loves to tie it into knots? I mean, I don't. It happens so easily. It's incredible because usually these things, you'd think, well, okay, I've unknotted it. It's straightened out. It's laying here. I'm not touching it much, and all of a sudden, boom! It's in 10 knots. Is there some kind of force in the universe that just automatically likes to tie shit into knots? And if so, could we tap into that force and somehow use it? You ever heard of a rat king? It's a real phenomenon. It's not bullshit. For a long time, people thought it was a legend, a myth, just like they thought ball lightning was a legend or a myth. Turns out it's not. A rat king is when enough rats get together that their tails all get tangled up. And then when you find them, they're just a big old bunch of dead rats with their tails all knotted because they couldn't go anywhere. This is real. Look up Rat King. There's some kind of a force that tends to take linear things and just twist them all up. If we can figure out how to tap into that power, well, I know we could create the Gordian knot. That would be easy. Releasing that energy might be different. I don't know. Put that in the back of your mind. But I just filmed a video with a lot of cords and lights and stuff, and I filmed it about this brand new product that I am coming out with. It's made of gold. I told you that I am the only person in the world who has this. I got it made just for me, just for myself. And in my next podcast, which I'll be putting out in the next couple of days, I am going to tell you about it, and then I'm going to put this video up for 7 days. This is your heads up, your last heads up. You're going to have 7 days to watch this video before it disappears. And there's a web page connected to it, and that will also disappear. And during that 7-day period, if you are one of my hardcore experimenters, hardcore fans, supporters, like if you're like me and you like the stuff that I like to do, I'm giving you 7 days to get this thing. And then I'm going to close it down, and then I'm going to have it manufactured and sent to you. So this video is it's actually kind of interesting on its own, though. There's a lot of educational content in the video. So make sure, if you want to see what this is, you sign up for my free e-newsletter at joshuapwarren.com. Free e-newsletter, and you will be notified immediately when this is available. I love creating cool, unique products for you. I really do. I mean, this is one of the things that gives me a lot of joy and pleasure, is taking something that I've discovered or I imagine and tinkering with it and getting something that works for me, and then saying, you know what, let's see what happens if other people get this, and then I make it available to other people and they love it. And when I was on my airplane trip recently, I was reading a comic book. Because when I go to an antique store, I'm always looking for like the old horror comics. For example, like the EC comics are the best. But this is a comic that I haven't done a lot of research on it, but I have this comic in front of me right now, and it's called Creepy. And I've heard about this before, and I think this looks like a ripoff of like Tales from the Crypt, EC Comics horror stuff. And the publisher is James Warren. So I've really got to look this up and figure out who James Warren is. Wouldn't that be crazy if I'm related to the guy? But I love reading these old horror comics. And that's, I was talking about people sending me stuff, like sending me gifts. That's something that that will really make me happy. If you send me some old horror comics, that's always a winner for me. I don't care, birthday, Christmas, whatever. I love these old horror comics, and I don't just like put them in a sleeve and stick them away and say my precious. No, I tear these things apart, man. I read them. Like this one, for example, I paid $15 for it, and the cover's already gone. But you know what? It's being used. It's the intended purpose is being used. As I was reading it on the airplane, the cover came off. But I don't care. I love this shit, man. So anyway, I'm reading this comic book. They have these ads for all these crazy things, and you're like, oh man, I wish I could order that right now and for the same price. And I thought about this today in particular because Mobius doesn't know anything about the fact that I was just reading some of these ads on an airplane, and yet he sent me a message and said, hey, here's a book that compiles all of these crazy like ads you could get from old comic books. And he sent me a link, and I was like, buy it now. But here's what I wanted to tell you. So here I was on the airplane. I'm reading this. It's issue of Creepy number 10, which was published in 1966 by Warren Publishing Company. Again, no relation to me as far as I know. It's got like a crazy zombie on the front. Love this stuff. So anyway, I'm flipping through here, and I get to the back where they have all these cool ads, and they have like a Venus flytrap and an ant farm and a dog whistle. And then they have this ad. Who else wants a live monkey? And there's a picture of a little monkey there. And it says free cage, free leash, and collar. And I'm just going to read this ad for you. This is from 1966. You can be the happiest boy on your block with your own live baby squirrel monkey. Have loads of fun and enjoyment. Train your monkey to do tricks, come to you for food, petting, and playing. These delightful monkeys grow to almost 12 inches tall and are golden in color, slender, short-haired. Each monkey has a heart-shaped face, appealing eyes, and grows a tail almost 14 inches long. No problem caring for or feeding your monkey. It eats lettuce, carrots, fruits, almost anything you eat. Affectionate and lovable, almost a member of the family. Soon after you get your pet, dress it in cute costumes. Put on shows. You and your monkey can be real pals. This is in bold. Big letters. Live delivery guaranteed. Send $19.95 in check or money order. Pay delivery man small express charges for your safe delivery to you. And that you can order from Captain Company, New York, New York. It seems almost like a personal ad, doesn't it? Slender, heart-shaped face, appealing eyes, 14 inches long. Well, that's the tail. Affectionate, lovable. Dress it in cute costumes. Put on shows. You can be real pals. When I read this, it reminds me of the Martian monkey. You remember that story? I read that to you not too long ago on a podcast. 1953, I believe. Yeah, 1953 in Atlanta, Georgia, where those guys, they went into, like teenage guys, they went into a pet shop and they more or less got one of these little monkeys and they killed it and skinned it and did all this stuff with it and pulled off an alien hoax. So yeah, I mean, like, I am fascinated by these old ads. And, when I was a kid, I wanted everything. And as an adult, I still want everything. If I could go back and buy every single thing that I ever saw in any of these old comic books, I would do it, and I could definitely afford it because everything was so cheap. You know what I mean? But it just doesn't exist anymore, and it's a form of, like, commercialism and advertising and pop culture stuff that I really find intriguing. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll open up a gallery of just wacky things like that. I think Timothy Green Beckley, he puts out some stuff that has a bit of that flavor to it nowadays, but he's one of a dying breed. When he's gone and when I'm gone, I don't know where you're going to go. Like, nobody else is going to make cool shit for you guys. But hey, listen to this. Listen to this. I have in my curiosity shop 10 vortex wands now in stock. That has been out of stock for a long time. I have 10 of them right now in stock at my curiosity shop. Just posted them, I think, yesterday. What is the vortex wand? Go there, watch the video. It is a wand that moves, it spins, and it's got some very special properties, especially if you want to rebalance your stuff and clean your aura and all that kind of stuff. Go to joshuapwarren.com, go to the curiosity shop, and look at the vortex wands. Well, I've got a really cool podcast coming up for you soon. But here in the United States, this is Memorial Day weekend. And so I really want to sincerely thank all of you who have devoted your time and even given your lives to protect freedom. And it's more important than ever to think about what that means and to think about why all of those people sacrificed so much. And no matter where you're living in the world right now, okay, no matter what country that you're in, I want you to just remember this weekend as we celebrate Memorial Day here in the U.S. If you forget your history, if you forget it, if you don't talk about it with others, if you don't teach it to your kids, then you are basically giving a free pass to tyrants. Because tyrannical people, they have not changed. They will never change. They do the same thing over and over. It goes through cycles. They weasel their ways into trying to take your freedom. And a lot of it goes down or goes back to, like, the problem, reaction, solution. Create a problem, create some kind of fearful reaction, and then say, oh, here's the solution. And people will bend over backward and allow it. So at very least, wherever you live in the world, because I know people all over the world listen to this podcast, and I'm very grateful for you, and I'm thankful for that. All of us in the world have been subjected to tyranny at some point. Take a moment to think about how the tyrants took people's freedom in the past in your country, in your neck of the woods, and then go back and compare that to some of the problems that we see in today's world and determine that you're not going to allow that to happen again, and educate others and tell others, and especially tell your children about it. Don't rely on the public education system. Don't rely on the government, okay? You have to be ultimately the teacher who puts history in perspective. And so this is how we keep our rights, we keep our freedom, we keep our language and our ability to express things and to grow and transform into a better society where we are less enslaved intellectually and physically And so, again, here in the U.S., thank you to all of you who are associated in any way with those who have served our country. It is what keeps society and civilization intact, especially considering that you've got a mind of your own and you don't have to listen to the tyrants. Keep that in mind as well. So, all right, my next podcast, like I say, it's going to be a good one, and you will want to make sure that you are a subscriber to my e-newsletter and you follow me on Twitter and all that, because it's all going to hit at once when I make this announcement and give you the 7-day window of opportunity. So, go to joshuapwarren.com, sign up for the free e-newsletter. If you're interested, go, look at all kinds of weird shit, but go to the Curiosity Shop. Check out the Vortex one. Again, I only have 10 of those left, and then it will say sold out. And while you're there and you're clicking around, be sure that you click the link to this podcast. If you like this podcast, tell everybody about it, will you? Will you do that? Just share it. Got nothing to lose. If you go to joshuapwarren.com, you'll see a link there on the homepage to this podcast. It's called Joshua P. Warren Daily. It's always short, always free, commercial free, uncensored, independent. You can subscribe through various ways, or you can just follow me on Twitter at Joshua P. Warren, at Joshua P. Warren, and I usually will tweet when a new one is available. So that is it for today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your interest and support. Thank you for staying curious. And I will talk to you again soon.